Aliens stunned by the human battleship. That defies all logic. The iron meridian dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly 400 hours, and the synth fleet had 7 seconds to register what they were looking at before their sensor arrays started contradicting each other. 7 seconds was enough. Velhar, Supreme Commander of the 3rd Synth Interdiction Fleet, stared at his tactical display and waited for the readings to correct. They did not correct. The object hanging 40,000 km off his port bow was reading simultaneously as a dead hulk and a fully active warship. Its power signature was fragmented across 12 different frequency bands that should not have been running at the same time. Its hull mass registered at 4 different contradictory figures, depending on which sensor cluster he used, and its shape, if shape was even the right word, looked like someone had taken 5 different ships, cut them into rough sections, and bolted them back together at angles that served no recognizable purpose. Velhar had commanded warships for 31 years. He had fought the Dreth Confederacy. He had pacified Outer Rim colonies twice. He understood warship design the way other beings understood breathing. He did not understand this. "Get me an identification," he said. His signals officer, a young synth named Breck, was already working his console with both manipulator arms. "Commander." The transponder reads as a human vessel. Designation: Iron Meridian. Classification: Breck paused. "Sir, the classification database returns no match. The hull configuration does not correspond to any registered human military design. Any design in any database, sir, of any species." Velhar's 3 eyes narrowed. His fleet had been holding the Caros system for 19 days. The human colony on Caros IV had been under blockade for 16 of those days. He had expected a human response. Eventually, he had expected a fleet, a task force, at minimum a standard squadron of their predictable destroyers. He had not expected one ship that his sensors could not agree on. The communication channel opened from the human vessel. The voice that came through was calm, not the practiced calm of a diplomat, the flat calm of someone who had stopped pretending a long time ago. "This is Captain Owen Drake of the Iron Meridian. You are blockading a civilian population. You have until I finish this sentence to start pulling back." The sentence ended. Velhar did not pull back. "Human vessel," he said, "you are one ship against 43. Stand down your systems and prepare for boarding, or we remove you from this system the way we remove wreckage." A pause, not a nervous pause, a pause, like someone setting something heavy down on a table very carefully. 43, Drake said, noted. The channel closed. On the tactical display, the Iron Meridian began moving, not retreating, not holding position, moving toward the fleet, directly toward the fleet. Accelerating. Breck turned from his console. "Sorry, it's power readings just tripled, but our sensors still cannot agree on where the power is originating." Velhar watched the ship close the distance. It moved with a strange, lurching quality, not the smooth arc of a well-built vessel, but something that kept adjusting its trajectory in short, sharp corrections, like an animal that had rebuilt itself after a serious injury and was running on new muscle. It had grown for the purpose. Targeted, full forward battery. Targeting lock. Is Breck stopped. "Sir, I Cannot hold a stable targeting lock. Whole geometry keeps feeding. Contradictory return angles to the targeting system. It is not a jamming field, the hull itself is. Estimate and fire. 43 synth warships opened fire on the Iron Meridian. What happened next was the first thing in 31 years of combat that Velhar genuinely could not explain. The shots hit, most of them hit, energy. Detonations lit up across the hull of the Iron Meridian in patterns that should have gutted a vessel that size in under 4 seconds. The synth had calculated human hull tolerances 8 years ago. And GT snorts. And GT, they had updated those calculations 3 times since. They were confident in the numbers. The Iron Meridian flew through the barrage. Not undamaged, he could see hull sections buckling, 2 of its mismatched engine clusters going dark, but it did not slow, it did not veer, it came through the fire the way a boulder comes through water, and then it fired back. Not one weapon system, not a clean broadside. Something that Velhar's tactical computer spent 3 full seconds trying to classify before returning a single result, unknown configuration. The shot that hit his 3rd destroyer combined energy types that synth engineering had never considered pairing, because pairing them was structurally incoherent. The destroyer's shields did not fail, they simply stopped being the right shape to stop what came through them. The ship went dark in one hit. Velhar gripped the edge of his command console. His fleet had just lost a destroyer to a single volley from a single human ship that his sensors still could not properly read. All ships, he said, and his voice was steadier than he felt. Focus fire. I want that ship taken apart. In the distance, the Iron Meridian was already adjusting course. It moved like it was looking for something specific. Lieutenant Kate Holt was doing something at her weapons console that the manual said required 2 people and a functioning tertiary targeting relay. She was doing it alone. The relay had been dark since the first synth salvo found them. She was managing fine. The Iron Meridian shook around her as another volley connected with the outer hull. The impact alarm had stopped sounding after the 4th hit because Pete Garner had rerouted the alarm system's power to something more useful, and he had not asked permission before doing it, and Kate had not complained. Port rail battery, fire on bearing 227. Mark 9, she said into her headset. Port rail battery is partially offline, said the voice of Corporal End Briggs from the lower gunnery deck. I have 2 of the 4 emitters working. 2 is fine fire. The ship's frame vibrated as the rail battery discharged. Kate watched the targeting screen. The synth destroyer on bearing 227 had been harassing their port side for 3 minutes, probing for a consistent weak point in the hull. The 2 working emitters sent a spread across its bow, not enough to destroy it, enough to make it adjust course. Buying time. Everything she was doing right now was buying time. Captain Owen Drake stood at the center of the bridge and had not sat down since the engagement started. He stood with his arms at his sides and watched the tactical display with the focused stillness of someone reading a language they knew well. Every few seconds he said something short and specific to one of his crew. No wasted words, no reassurance, just coordinates, bearing adjustments, and the occasional single word instruction that somehow landed Exactly right. First Officer Laura Finch was at the navigation console, and she had been flying the ship through a gap between two synth cruisers that was technically narrower than the iron meridian's registered beam width. She was managing this because the iron meridian's registered beam width was not accurate. The ship's actual profile shifted depending on which sections were extended and which were collapsed inward, and Laura knew every one of those configurations from 3 years of flying a vessel that gave different answers every time you asked it a simple question about itself. She threaded the gap. Both cruisers fired. Both sets of shots passed through the space the iron meridian had occupied approximately half a second earlier. Through, she said. Good, Drake said. Take us around to their command cluster. Pete, I need the secondary drive. Down in the engine bay, Pete Garner looked up from 3 things he was doing simultaneously and spoke to the nearest intercom panel. The secondary drive is currently providing power to the starboard weapons grid and keeping the forward structural lattice from compressing. If I reroute it to propulsion, you'll have the speed you want and also potentially a shorter ship. How much shorter? About 40 m shorter from the front. A pause from the bridge. Find another way, Drake said. Already on it, Pete said, and went back to what he was doing. This was how engineering worked on the Iron Meridian. Pete had been the ship's chief engineer for 4 years. Before that, he had spent 6 years repairing ships that other engineers had declared beyond repair, salvaging systems from vessels that other engineers had scrapped, and learning to make incompatible technologies talk to each other through methods that would not survive inspection by anyone with a formal degree in the subject. He was very good at things that should not work. The Iron Meridian was, in many ways, his best work. He pulled power from the secondary drive, rerouted it through a buffer network he had built himself from components sourced from 4 different ship classes, and fed the output into the propulsion grid through a junction that technically violated the manufacturer's specifications for 2 of the 3 systems involved. The drive engaged, the structural lattice held. The forward section did not compress. You have your speed, he said into the intercom. On the tactical display, Velhar was watching the Iron Meridian accelerate. Again, he had now lost 2 destroyers and 1 light cruiser. He had hit the human ship over 200 times. He had damaged it visibly and substantially. And yet every time he thought he had identified the pattern of its weak points, the ship behaved differently. The section that had absorbed 4 direct hits without failing would suddenly route energy differently on the 5th hit, as though the internal structure had physically rearranged itself. Get me a structural analysis, he told his science officer. I want to know what its frame is made of. The science officer, an older synth named Goss, pulled the spectral analysis. He stared at it. He pulled it again. He said nothing for several seconds. Commander, Goss said slowly, the hull is made of at least 11 different alloy compositions. Several of them are designed signatures from human vessel classes that are no longer in production. One of the spectral returns matches the hull composition of the class they were using 8 years ago, the class they were using when we began the interdiction campaigns. Velhar looked at the tactical display. at the ship's silhouette at the angles. That matched no design logic. "Goss," he said, "what exactly are we looking at?" Goss took a moment. "I believe," he said carefully, "that this vessel is constructed from components of multiple ships, not one hull, many hulls joined together. That is not a practical engineering concept." "No," Goss agreed, "it is not." On the bridge of the Iron Meridian, Kate Holt fired the rebuilt plasma cannon, a weapon system Pete had assembled from 3 separate sources and housed in a turret originally designed for a completely different purpose, and watched it tear through the shields of a synth patrol craft that had been positioning to flank them. The patrol craft rolled out of the fight, not destroyed, discouraged. Drake watched it go. "Laura, hard starboard." "Kate, give me everything we have on the command ship's forward section." Everything they had was, at that moment, the 2 working rail emitters, the rebuilt plasma cannon, 1 conventional torpedo tube with 8 rounds remaining, and a directed energy system in the bow that Pete had not fully finished installing and that Kate had been using anyway since the 3rd minute of the engagement, with results she considered acceptable. She fired all of it at once. The combination should not have worked. The energy output from the directed system interfered with the guidance package on the torpedo. The rail shot crossed the plasma burst at an angle that scattered both. Any tactical computer modeling the shot would have flagged it as a waste. What the tactical computer would not have modeled was the way the scattered plasma burst coated the front shield array of the synth command ship. Just before the rail shot arrived, the plasma did not penetrate the shield. It clung to it, and when the rail shot hit, it grounded through the plasma coating directly into the shield emitter housing. The command ship's forward shields went down completely. Velhar had approximately 2 seconds to process this before he ordered evasive maneuvers. In those 2 seconds, the torpedo guidance package partially degraded and running on backup inertial tracking found the forward section of his ship and decided it was close enough. The explosion was not catastrophic. The command ship survived it, but the forward sensor array was gone. The primary weapons targeting was gone, and Velhar had a whole breach in Section 4 that his damage control teams were already racing toward. He pulled his ship back from the engagement line. The Iron Meridian did not let the gap grow. It followed. Velhar called in the reserve wing. 12 additional warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Caro system within 8 minutes of his order. He watched them arrive on the tactical display and felt something he did not usually permit himself during an engagement: relief. The Iron Meridian was one ship, one badly designed, stubborn, unreasonable ship. 12 fresh warships joining 40 surviving vessels should have ended the question entirely. He knew this mathematically. He trusted mathematics. He had also, over the past 20 minutes, been developing a suspicion that the Iron Meridian did not particularly care about mathematics. The reserve wing moved in on an encirclement pattern, standard doctrine for trapping a single vessel of known size and mass. The Iron Meridian size was still a disputed figure on his sensor display, but the estimates were close enough for an encirclement. Velhar watched the geometry close. He watched the Iron Meridian watch it, too. That was the thing that unsettled him. Most, the human ship did not behave like a vessel fighting for survival. It moved like a vessel working through a problem. Every adjustment it made felt deliberate, every position it held felt chosen. It was not running, it was not reacting, it was thinking. "Commander," said Breck from the signal station, "the human ship is hailing us." "Ignore it." "Sir, it is not a surrender hail." Velhar turned. "What is it?" Breck worked the console. "It appears to be a data transmission. It is sending us our own tactical data, our fleet positions, our reserve wing approach vectors, our current power states across 17 vessels." Another pause. "Sir, it is more current and more accurate than our own internal fleet network." Velhar stared at the display. The Iron Meridian had just shown him, in exact detail, precisely where every ship he had was positioned, what condition it was in, and how it was moving. It had sent him his own battle plan. "Why," he said slowly, "would they send us that?" No one on the bridge had an answer. On the Iron Meridian, Kate Holt had the answer, which was that it was Drake's idea, and it had made her laugh for the first time in 40 minutes. The transmission was not tactical generosity, it was a message. It said, "We see all of this, we see all of you, and we are still here." She turned back to her console. The encirclement was tightening, 12 fresh ships on the outer ring, the remaining survivors of the original fleet closing. From inside, the Iron Meridian was in the middle of a shrinking formation made entirely of warships. "Pete," she said into her headset, "what do we have that they have not seen yet?" A pause from the engine bay. That meant Pete was thinking and building at the same time. "The mining array," he said. Kate thought about that. "The mining array is for asteroid processing." "Correct. It fires compressed thermal lances, designed to crack open nickel iron rock bodies." "Also correct." "Pete, Kate, we are surrounded by 52 warships. We are surrounded by 52 warships with hulls primarily composed of high-density metal alloys," Pete said pleasantly, "which are, technically speaking, a type of metal-rich solid material, not entirely unlike nickel iron rock bodies." A longer pause. "How long to reroute it to the external hard points?" Kate said. "It is already done," Pete said. "I did it while you were thinking about whether to ask." Kate turned in her chair and looked at Captain Drake. He was already looking at her. "The mining array," she said. He nodded once. "Tell Pete to hold it until we are inside their tightest ring. Maximum effect." Laura Finch was threading the Iron Meridian through the closing encirclement with the precision of someone doing something that should not be possible and simply declining to acknowledge that fact. The ship was too large for the gaps she was finding. It went through them anyway. She had stopped looking at the collision proximity alerts 20 minutes ago. She was flying on 3 years of knowing exactly how the ship moved, and that knowledge was more reliable than any alert system. Pete had rerouted power away from the Synth Reserve Wing's lead ship, a heavy cruiser designated KSV Ardent by its own registry, moved to cut off the Iron Meridian's forward vector. Its captain was quick and capable and had correctly read the angle and cut it off well. Laura adjusted the vector by 11 degrees and passed under the Ardent at a margin that would later be described in the damage report as inadvisable. The encirclement closed. The Iron Meridian was inside the ring. Now fully surrounded, every synth weapon on every synth ship was pointed inward at a range where targeting error was essentially impossible. Velhar allowed himself one moment of confidence. Fire, he said. 47 synth warships fired simultaneously at the Iron Meridian from close range, and Pete Garner fired the mining array, not outward at the synth ships. He fired it inward through the Iron Meridian's own reinforced internal channels, using the ship's frame as a guide rail, and out through 6 external hardpoints on all sides simultaneously, converting the compressed thermal lances from a focus point tool to an area burst that expanded in a sphere from the ship's center outward. The synth shots hit, they hit hard. Iron Meridian buckled and groaned through every weld and joint in its mismatched frame. 4 sections depressurized. 1 engine cluster failed completely. The forward section took damage that would have finished a purpose-built ship 3 times its size. The mining array went off inside all of that. The thermal burst expanded outward through the synth ring like a pressure wave. It was not designed as a weapon. It did not behave like a conventional weapon. It behaved like what it was, a tool meant to crack open large metal objects at close range, fired in every direction at once from the center of a ring of large metal objects. The synth encirclement came apart. Not destroyed, not all of it, but the inner ring of ships, 11 vessels in total, took structural damage ranging from severe to complete. 6 of them were immediately out of the fight. Outer ring scattered, individual captains making individual decisions to open distance from a ship that had just demonstrated it could hurt them from inside their own formation. In the chaos, the Iron Meridian did something that Velhar would replay on his tactical recording for a long time. Afterward, it did not flee the gap it had just blown open. It held position at the center of the dispersed fleet, damaged, leaking atmosphere from 4 sections. 1 engine cluster dragging dark behind it. It held position and turned slowly on its axis, as if looking at each of them in turn. Then it opened a hailing frequency, the same calm voice. "I'm still here," Drake said. "How many more of yours would you like to spend on this?" Velhar's hands were pressed flat on the console in front of him. He looked at his fleet status. He looked at the damage tallies. He looked at the Iron Meridian on the display. His science officer, Goss, spoke quietly from the side of the bridge. "Commander, I need to revise my earlier analysis." Velhar did not look away from the display. "Revise it." "The hull spectral returns," Goss said. "I believe the vessel is not constructed from the components of multiple ships of the same era. The components span multiple eras. Some of the alloy signatures are from this decade, some are from 4 decades ago, some are from the very beginning of the synth interdiction campaigns." The bridge was silent. "It has been building itself," Goss said, "for a very long time." Velhar did not answer the hail. He pulled his remaining combat-ready vessels into a new formation and ordered 2 more reserve wings forward from the system perimeter. He had arrived in the Caro system with 43 warships and the complete confidence of a commander who had never faced a problem he could not solve with superior numbers. He now had 19 functional vessels and a rapidly diminishing confidence in the relevance of numbers. Still, numbers were what he had. 24 more synth warships arrived in 2 groups within the next 12 minutes. His total active strength was back to 43. He watched them arrive with something that was not satisfaction but was as close to it as the current situation permitted. The Iron Meridian watched them too. On the bridge, Drake looked at the new arrivals on the tactical display for a moment, then turned to Laura. How are we holding together? Laura ran through her status board. 4 sections vented and sealed. Engine Cluster 3 is gone. Clusters 1, 2, and 4 are functional. Hull integrity is at 61% overall, 38% in the forward section. She paused. We are technically space-worthy. Technically. Pete's word. Drake nodded and looked at Kate. Weapons. Rail battery is down to 1 working. Emitter plasma cannon intact. Torpedo tube has 4 rounds remaining. The directed energy bow system is Kate considered how to phrase it, running beyond the parameters Pete originally intended. Meaning Pete told me to stop using it after the last shot, and I said I would. And then I used it again. Drake looked at the bow emitter on the internal camera. It was glowing a color it was not supposed to glow. Pete, he said into the intercom. I am aware, Pete said from the engine bay. I would like everyone to note that I built that system from spare components in 11 days on a moving ship, and it has worked every single time someone has fired it, despite the fact that 2 of the primary regulators are pieces I machined by hand from memory because we did not have the correct parts. I think that earns it the right to glow whatever color it wants. A pause on the bridge. Fair, Drake said. The new synth formation was moving in. Now, Velhar had arranged it differently. This time no encirclement, a hammer formation, the bulk of his force driving straight at the Iron Meridian's damaged forward section, while a flanking group curved around to cut off retreat. He had learned he was not giving the human ship another opportunity to use its own formation against itself. He had also ordered his ships to fire in rotating volleys rather than simultaneously. Rotating volleys were harder to predict and kept continuous pressure on a target, wearing it down steadily rather than delivering any single catastrophic blow. Velhar had adapted. The hammer came in. Drake let it close until the rain advantage of the synth longer distance weapons was neutralized, and then he drove the Iron Meridian directly into the leading point of the formation, not into the flanks where the synth ships were spread, into the tip of the hammer, into the densest concentration of enemies. This was not a logical thing to do. It was, however, extremely effective. At close range, the Iron Meridian's mismatched weapons array, which lacked precise standoff accuracy at long distance, became devastating. Every shot connected. The plasma cannon took apart 2 vessels in close succession. The remaining 4 torpedoes went in sequence into the drive sections of 3 different ships, and Kate had to identify a 4th target because she had fired 4 torpedoes at 3 targets and connected with all of them and still had 1 left. Pete Garner was doing things to the engine output that he would later describe in his report as exploratory. The Iron Meridian accelerated through the hammer point faster than any of Velhar's projections had accounted for, scattering the tight synth formation and turning the organized strike into individual ships, making individual decisions at close range against a vessel none of their targeting systems could fully resolve. In the middle of all that, Pete made a discovery. He had been monitoring the power output from the 4 remaining engine clusters and noticed something he had not had time to look into during the engagement. The power reading from the damaged 3rd cluster, the dead one, the one he had written off 40 minutes ago, was not the reading of a dead engine. It was the reading of an engine running very quietly, not dead. Waiting. He checked his gauges twice, then a 3rd time. Engine cluster 3 was operational. It had been operational for approximately 20 minutes. It had, as best Pete could determine, repaired something internally. On its own, he checked the maintenance logs. There was no record of anyone going to Cluster 3. Nobody had been down there. "Captain," Pete said into the intercom, and his voice had a quality it had not carried before in this engagement, the quality of someone who has found something they cannot explain. "Engine Cluster 3 is back online. On the bridge." Drake absorbed this. "Did you fix it?" "No," Pete said, "I did not fix it." A pause. "Does it matter right now?" Drake said. Pete thought about it seriously for 2 seconds. "In a battle, no. Philosophically, enormously, but we can address that later." "Later," Drake agreed. "All 4 clusters, give me everything." The Iron Meridian surged forward through the reforming synth fleet with an increase in acceleration that Velhar's tactical display registered, recalculated, and registered again. Because the first figure had seemed impossible, the ship was faster than it had been at the start of the engagement. It had absorbed enormous punishment, and it was faster. Velhar made a decision he had been avoiding for several minutes, because making it meant admitting something he was not ready to admit. He opened a channel to his fleet-wide command network and ordered all vessels to concentrate fire on the Iron Meridian center mass with everything they had remaining. No rotation, no sequencing, everything. All of it, all focused on one point. If the human ship absorbed it, it absorbed it. If it did not, the engagement ended. 41 warships fired on the Iron Meridian simultaneously. The shots hit home, the center of the Iron Meridian took damage that was, by any reasonable measure, unsurvivable. Hull plating sheared away. Internal sections collapsed. 2 more engine clusters went dark, then one came back. Then the second flickered and steadied. Power readings across the ship surged and dropped and surged again. The Iron Meridian did not stop. It came out of the barrage slower, burning in 3 places. Hull integrity. Figures on Laura's board had dropped too. Numbers that made her say nothing and grip the navigation console tighter. But it came out, and it targeted Velhar's command ship with everything that still worked. Kate Holt had 1 rail emitter, the plasma cannon, the bow system glowing the wrong color, and the certainty that she was going to fire all 3 of them together in a combination that Pete had not technically approved, and that the ship had never technically attempted before. She fired all 3. The command ship shields lasted approximately 1 second of concentrated fire. After that, they did not. Velhar's command ship was not destroyed. He would be specific about that later in his report to the Synth High Command, because the distinction seemed important to him in ways that were difficult to fully explain. The Iron Meridian had fired on his command ship with its remaining weapons, and the shields had failed in the hull, had taken direct hits, and 6 of his bridge crew were receiving medical attention, but the ship was not destroyed. It was crippled. There was a difference. He held on to that distinction while his damage control team sealed 3 hull breaches, and his engineering staff rerouted power from systems that no longer existed to systems that were still trying to function. Then he opened a channel to the Iron Meridian. The calm voice answered immediately, not breathless, not triumphant, just present. Captain Owen Drake. Supreme Commander Velhar, Drake said. Your command ship is crippled. You have 11 fully combat-ready vessels remaining out of 43 plus 2 reserve wings at reduced effectiveness. My ship is still here. Velhar could hear something in the background of the transmission, not alarms, not the controlled noise of a crew managing a crisis, more like the sound of a ship settling, the deep structural sounds of a large vessel adjusting to the damage it had received, the way an old building sounds in the wind. Your ship has taken catastrophic damage, Velhar said. By my engineering staff's calculations, you should not be able to maneuver. Your engineering staff has been calculating this ship wrong since 400 hours, Drake said. I would stop trusting those numbers. Velhar leaned back in his command chair. Around him, the bridge was quiet in the specific way that bridges go quiet when everyone is doing exactly what they are supposed to do, and not one person is willing to be the first to speak. Otherwise, he looked at his tactical display. He looked at the Iron Meridian. He asked the question that had been building in him since the engagement began, the one his science officer had been circling, the one he suspected was the only real question left. What is that ship? He said. A pause on the other end, not a calculating pause, the pause of someone deciding how much of a thing to tell. Do you want the short version or the long one? Drake said. Short. Every ship the synth destroyed in the interdiction campaigns of the last 8 years, Drake said. We salvaged what we could. Every hull section we could recover, we recovered. Every drive component, every weapons mount, every piece of structural plating we could cut free before a wreck drifted beyond reach. We brought it all to a construction platform at the edge of human space, and we built one ship from all of it. That is the Iron Meridian. It is not one ship, it is every ship you took from us. We just put them back together. The bridge of Velhar's command ship was completely silent. That, Velhar said after a moment, is why our sensors could not read it. 11 different hull alloys components from 7 different decades of human ship design, drive systems that have never been paired because they were never meant to be paired, weapons, configurations that no tactical database has a record of because no one designed them on purpose. Drake paused. My chief engineer describes the whole thing as an ongoing conversation between parts that were never supposed to meet. Velhar looked at his science officer, Gauss, who was standing very still at his station with the expression of someone who has had a long-standing confusion resolved into something far larger. The colony on Caro IV, Velhar said, has been waiting 16 days, Drake said, and I have been very patient about discussing the technical specifications of my ship, but I think we should talk about the colony now. Velhar looked at his tactical display. One final time at 11 combat-ready ships. At the Iron Meridian, at the colony icon. On Caro IV, a small green indicator that had been there since he arrived and that he had not thought about once in the last 2 hours. The blockade is lifted, he said. It was not a negotiated statement. It was not a conditional withdrawal pending review. It was a simple declarative sentence from a commander who had arrived in the Caro system with 43 warships and complete confidence and was leaving with 11 ships, a crippled flagship, and a revised understanding of what a vessel could be. The synth fleet began its withdrawal. Laura Finch watched them go on the navigation display. She watched each ship make its faster-than-light calculation and disappear from the system one by one until the display showed only the Iron Meridian and the planet below and clear space in every direction. She sat quietly for a moment. "That is all of them," she said. Nobody on the bridge said anything for a few seconds, not celebration, not exhaustion exactly, something quieter than either of those things. The sound of people who had been doing something very hard for a very long time and had not stopped, and now the thing was done. Kate Holt ran a systems check. She ran it twice because the first result seemed optimistic and she wanted to confirm. Hull integrity at 41% to operational. Engine clusters rail battery is down. Entirely plasma cannon operational. Torpedo tube empty. The bow system as she looked at her console. Pete. Still on, Pete said from the engine bay. "I told you I would stop using it. You told me that twice and used it 3 more times. At this point I consider it an understanding between you and your own conscience. The system is fine by the way, whatever color it is now. It seems to like it." Kate looked at the emitter readout and decided she would investigate that later, or she would ask Pete to investigate it, and then not question his findings too closely. Drake stepped back to the navigation station and stood next to Laura. They both looked at the tactical display. Together, clean space, the colony on Caro IV still green, the readouts of what they were standing inside, which was not a clean picture on any internal board, but was still here. Garner, Drake said into the intercom. "Damage assessment, how long to get the Meridian fully operational?" A long pause from the engine bay, a much longer pause than Pete Garner usually took for a question he knew the answer to. "Define fully operational," Pete said. Carefully. "Flying, fighting, doing what she does. 6 months minimum. Hull work alone is going to take 3. The drive reconfiguration after losing cluster 3 and then regaining it, which I am going to look into very carefully once we are somewhere stable, is another month of testing. The weapon systems need a full rebuild. The forward section needs structural reinforcement before I am comfortable calling it a forward section and not just a strongly worded suggestion at the front of the ship." 6 months, Drake said. 6 months, Pete confirmed, assuming no complications, which this ship does not have a history of offering. Drake looked at the tactical display for a long moment at the clean space at Caro IV. 6 months, he said again, and there was no complaint in it, no resignation, just the sound of someone marking a number down in a ledger that had seen larger ones. Laura Finch looked at him. "We have been at this for 8 years. "Yes," Drake said. 6 months is nothing. Yes, he said it is. He reached over and keyed the colony. Frequency. The response from Cario IV came back in. Seconds, a colonial administrator's voice, high and shaking and working hard. Not to show it, asking if the blockade was truly lifted and if supply ships were truly free to come through. Yes, Drake said, get your people fed. He closed the channel. Around him, the iron meridian made its sound, the settling sound, the sound of 11 hull alloys adjusting to the absence of battle stress. Somewhere deep in the frame, something ticked and released the way old structures do when the weight on them finally changes. All those ships, all those years, still here,